I remember the silence more than anything. After the funeral, the house felt like it was holding its breath, every wall swollen with years of secrets and unspoken words. I sat at the old dining table, the one we used for birthdays and arguments alike, and stared at the envelope in front of me. My brother's handwriting, Daniel, slanted and careless, just like always. My fingers shook as I unfolded the paper. "You were always good at taking care of things. This is just one more." That was it. No love, no gratitude, no explanation, just a single sentence that landed like a stone on my chest. I read it again and again, hoping it would change, that somewhere between the lines I'd find kindness. But all I could see was the echo of every moment I'd cleaned up after him, defended him, carried him. "You were always good at taking care of things." The words curled in my mind like smoke, choking every memory. Outside, the evening light bent through the curtains, catching the dust on the floor, the same floor I'd scrubbed before the guests came, before the coffin left, before I knew I was the only one left holding the weight. He had taken everything. The house, the savings, even the old piano I learned to play on. The lawyer's words were polite, but their meaning was brutal. Daniel inherits the entire estate. And then, this note. My consolation prize. My brother's way of saying, "You don't matter, but you'll survive." I pressed the paper against my chest, but instead of comfort, I felt a coldness seep into me, slow and permanent. Somewhere in that silence, I realized he hadn't just taken our parents' legacy. He'd stolen the story of who I thought I was, because if I wasn't the caretaker, the good daughter, the dependable one, who was I? I crumpled the note in my hand, the paper crackling like a wound reopening. It was supposed to end with them. The debts, the caretaking, the exhaustion. But somehow, Daniel had found a way to make me keep cleaning up after him, even after they were gone, and that's when I remembered. It had always been this way. When I think back, it's almost funny how early the pattern began. Daniel was sunshine from the moment he could walk, loud, bright, impossible to ignore. He'd break a vase, and somehow I'd be the one apologizing for not watching him closely enough. Mother would sigh and say, "You know your brother's not as strong as you." "Be patient with him, Clara. Strong." That was the word she used instead of important. It meant responsible, not loved. Father wasn't cruel, just tired. He'd hide behind his newspaper when the shouting started, pretending not to hear when Daniel got caught lying or skipping school. "Boys will be boys," he'd say. But when I forgot to pick up milk once, it was a full lecture about being reliable. Daniel could charm anyone. Teachers, neighbors, girlfriends, they all adored him. I learned early that my place wasn't to shine but to steady. When he crashed the family car, I helped pay for repairs. When he failed a class, I tutored him all summer. And when Mother got sick the first time, it was me she called, not him. "You're my good girl," she whispered. "You always take care of things." Back then, those words felt like love. I wore them like a medal, not realizing they were shackles. Now, sitting here years later, with Daniel's note burning in my hand, I see it clearly. He didn't become the golden child by accident. We made him that way. Mother's softness, father's silence, and my obedience, all feeding his entitlement until it grew roots. He learned that I'd always clean up the mess. And I learned to mistake being needed for being loved, but love shouldn't feel like servitude, should it? There's a certain rhythm to sacrifice. It starts small, a skipped vacation, a postponed dream, until it becomes the only song you know how to sing. After Father's stroke, I took unpaid leave from work just until he got better. He never really did. Bills piled up like dust on the mantel, and somehow it was always me sorting through them, signing, paying, apologizing. Daniel visited when it was convenient. He'd arrive with flowers and stories about business trips, pose for a photo beside Father's wheelchair, then disappear again. Mother would smile through her exhaustion and say, "He's trying, Clara. You know how busy he is." When she fell ill, I didn't hesitate. I moved back home. I told myself it was temporary. That family came first. I watched my savings dwindle into nothing and let my engagement slip quietly out the back door, because now's not a good time. I became nurse, maid, accountant, emotional sponge. Every thank you from them felt like a lifeline, until it didn't. Until I realized gratitude without fairness is just another form of manipulation. Daniel called less and less. I heard about his promotions through relatives, his new car, his vacations. When he did call, it was always the same. "You're amazing, Clara. I don't know how you do it." Neither did I. I just knew I couldn't stop. Sometimes I'd sit by Mother's bed and imagine what it would feel like to live for myself. Then I'd tuck the thought away like a guilty secret and get back to work. I gave them everything: time, money, years of my life, believing one day they'd see it. But love built on duty always demands more, and by the time they were gone, there was nothing left to give. The lawyer's office smelled of old wood and lemon polish, too clean for grief, too polished for truth. I sat at the edge of the long table, palms flat, trying not to wrinkle the skirt I'd worn to both my parents' funerals. Daniel arrived late, of course, all cologne and easy charm, shaking hands like a celebrity greeting fans. "Sorry, traffic was murder," he said, flashing that smile that had always melted resistance. The lawyer chuckled obligingly. I just nodded. We were there to read the will, our parents' final word. I'd spent weeks handling everything: the insurance claims, the obituary, the funeral costs. Daniel handled appearances. Now, as the lawyer shuffled papers, my stomach twisted into knots. He cleared his throat. "According to the will of the late Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," his voice blurred into legalese. I caught fragments: property, total estate, executor Danielle Whitmore. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. When the words sole beneficiary landed, I felt my world tilt. My breath caught. I waited for a correction, a clause, anything. But the lawyer only folded his glasses neatly and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Whitmore." Daniel clapped his hands once, grinning. "Well, guess that settles it." I forced a smile, my throat burning. "I'm sure they had their reasons." He looked at me with mock sympathy. "You were always the practical one, Clara. You'll understand. Practical. Another word for disposable." The lawyer offered me a weak smile and murmured something about sentimental items that could be discussed later. I nodded, stood, and somehow made it to the hallway before the tears came. I had expected sadness, not erasure. Outside, the winter light was sharp enough to hurt. Daniel's laughter echoed behind me as he signed another paper. I told myself to breathe, to stay composed, but inside something was cracking. I just didn't know then that this was only the first cut. That night, the house felt like a stranger's. Empty rooms, hollow air, silence pressing on every wall. I'd spent the day boxing up our parents' things, unsure what was mine anymore. Maybe nothing ever was. I was halfway up the stairs when I noticed something slipped under my door, a folded piece of paper. My name scrawled across it in Daniel's impatient handwriting. For a moment, my heart dared to hope. Maybe an apology. Maybe a mistake fixed. But when I opened it, there it was. Short, sharp, final. "You were always good at taking care of things. Now take care of yourself." My fingers went numb. I read it once, twice, again, searching for a trace of warmth that wasn't there. The words felt rehearsed, like something he'd practiced in the mirror. Take care of yourself. As if I hadn't spent my whole life doing just that, for everyone but me. I wanted to tear the paper to shreds, but instead I folded it neatly, as if respecting the cruelty made it hurt less. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the window where the moonlight hit the boxes stacked against the wall. He had taken everything tangible. But that note, those few words were what gutted me, because in them, I heard every year I'd been invisible, reduced to the girl who takes care of things. And something in me finally started to break. The next morning, I woke up still wearing yesterday's clothes, Daniel's note beside me like a bruise I couldn't stop touching. I told myself I'd let it go, That confrontation wasn't worth it. But by the time I heard his car pull into the driveway, something inside me had already decided otherwise. He walked in whistling, his voice bright. "You're still here? Thought you'd be gone by now." "I just wanted to ask," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Why?" He looked at me like I'd asked about the weather. "Why what? Why the will? Why nothing for me?" He shrugged. "You know how they were. Mom always said you didn't care about money. You care about family, responsibility, all that." My voice cracked. "Daniel, I paid for half of Dad's hospital bills. I kept this house standing when you were off in Thailand, or wherever you were pretending to work." He smiled, not kindly. "Clara, you chose that. Nobody asked you to." It was the kind of line that makes years of obedience crumble in an instant. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "No, Daniel. You didn't have to ask, because you always knew I would. You made sure of it." He laughed then, a small, cruel sound. "Don't get dramatic. You've always been good at taking care of things, remember?" That sentence, again, like a curse. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the note from the table, shoved it into his chest. "You think this makes you powerful? You think I'll keep cleaning up after you forever?" He looked stunned for half a second, then smirked. "You're overreacting. Maybe I was. But for once, I didn't care." I walked past him, my footsteps echoing in the hall. The house smelled like dust and endings. Behind me, Daniel called my name, but I didn't turn back. Because for the first time, I wasn't the caretaker leaving. I was the woman walking away from her own cage. And though my hands were shaking, my heart whispered something new. Enough. The first few weeks after leaving felt like falling into a quiet that had no bottom. My new apartment was small. One window, one creaky chair, a mattress on the floor. But it was mine. No footsteps in the hallway, no lists of things to fix, no voices calling my name. Just the hum of the fridge and the sound of my own breathing. At first, the silence terrified me. I'd never heard life without obligation before. I'd wake up expecting someone to need me, a call from the hospital, a reminder from Mother. But there was only stillness. It was like learning to walk again after years of crawling. I kept Daniel's note in a drawer. Some days, I'd take it out and read it like a wound that refused to close. "You were always good at taking care of things." It used to sting, but now it sounded like an echo from a language I no longer spoke. Money was tight. I took small bookkeeping jobs, made soup from whatever was on sale, learned to enjoy the taste of solitude. Some nights I'd sit by the window with tea and wonder if anyone even noticed I was gone. And then, slowly, the silence shifted. It stopped feeling empty and started feeling clean. I began to see that what I'd called peace before, that tense, waiting calm in my parents' house, was never peace at all. It was suppression here, in this tiny apartment, surrounded by nothing. I was finally starting to hear myself think, and in that quiet voice, a question kept returning, one I had spent my whole life avoiding. If I wasn't the one taking care of everyone else, who could I become? It started small, like all revolutions do. I bought a set of paintbrushes from a thrift store, the kind that still smelled faintly of turpentine. They reminded me of the art classes I once loved before real life began. I cleared a corner of my apartment, laid an old bedsheet on the floor, and told myself I'd paint just to pass the time. But something happened the moment color touched canvas. For the first time in years, I wasn't erasing a mess. I was creating something that was mine. My strokes were clumsy, uneven, full of emotion I didn't have words for. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. When my boss at the temp office asked if I could just stay a few extra hours like always, I heard myself say, "No." The word startled both of us. But it didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like self-respect. I began saying no to little things, favors that drained me, people who only called when they needed something. Each no was terrifying, then freeing. With each painting, I watched myself reappear, a woman with dreams, flaws, and a quiet kind of strength. The walls of my apartment slowly filled with color, like proof that I existed beyond other people's expectations. One evening, while rinsing my brushes, I caught my reflection in the window, hair messy, paint on my hands but eyes alive. I smiled, not politely, not carefully, just honestly. For years, I had been the caretaker, the steady one, the background character. Now I was learning the art of being the main one, and though I didn't know it yet, that newfound strength would be tested sooner than I thought, because Daniel was about to come back. It was 3 years later when he showed up, unannounced, just like always. I recognized the sound of his car before I saw it, that same arrogant hum that used to make the neighbors glance out their windows. But this time, it wasn't confidence in his step when he knocked. It was desperation. When I opened the door, Daniel looked smaller somehow. The golden shine was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes sunken. "Clara," he said, voice low. I need your help." A long silence hung between us. The kind that used to make me fill it with comfort, solutions, forgiveness. "Not anymore. What happened?" I asked, though part of me already knew. He sighed. "Bad investments. The house, it's gone. I don't know what to do." He looked at me the same way he did when we were children, expecting me to fix everything. But I didn't step aside. I didn't offer tea or sympathy or rescue. I simply looked at him and said softly, "You were always good at taking care of things. Now take care of yourself." His face went pale, like the words had punched the air out of him. For a second I saw it. Recognition, regret, maybe even shame. I closed the door gently, not out of cruelty, but peace. For the first time, the house stayed quiet, not hollow, but calm. And in that stillness, I finally felt free. I still keep the note, the one that started it all. It's folded neatly in a drawer, edges soft from time. Sometimes I take it out, not to reopen the wound, but to remind myself how far I've come. You were always good at taking care of things. He was right, just not in the way he meant. I took care of memories, of grief, of myself. The inheritance was never the money, or the house, or the things left behind. It was the lesson I earned. That love built on debt isn't love at all. Now, when I walk through the old garden, I no longer see neglect. I see survival. The weeds have grown wild, yes, but they bloom too. And I've learned to let things grow, even the parts of me that once felt unworthy of light. Because finally, I am mine.